What is a complete human? Is it a cover model? Is it a science geek? Is it a fitness expert? Or all of the above and more? Janna and Evan are crusaders that walk the earth looking at today's issues that touch our hearts and minds. The honest and hopeful outlook on the advancement of today's society. The science behind the decay of human relationships. The necessary preparations for future generations. Join us as we look deep inside ourselves and embark on a journey into becoming a complete human.
I'd like to discuss a little bit about the physiological effects of these psychedelics. I think, we kind of have this cultural idea that, oh, you take something like this and then you start tripping balls. So what actually happens, whether that's MDMA or, I think LSD, and obviously some of these molecules are a little bit different, but, internally and physiologically, what is actually going on, and how does that have a profound impact on these indications?
That's a great question, and I guess the short answer is we don't know exactly. So, no, really. So what you're asking about is you're asking a mechanism of action question. How does it work? And I also hear you kind of asking, particularly pointing to biology, rather than say psychology, although they're kind of intertwined. And so maybe we could narrow it down to the serotonergic hallucinogens, just because that removes MDMA, which is different. And then, so in terms of the brain, well, there are people who are looking at different areas of the brain to see what might be affected. So given their name, they work primarily through serotonin. However, there's also kind of a cascading effect in the brain, which is I'm not a neuroscientist, so this is a little bit kind of above my level of knowledge, but it's not sufficient to just say, oh, it just works on serotonin. It works on actually quite a lot of different neurotransmitters, but the primary action is through serotonin. Currently, one way to answer that question, right now, there's a lot of interest in this construct of the default mode network. Is that something that you've talked about on your show at all, or has
we have not? We're familiar with it, but have not discussed it on the show.
I'm actually not familiar. Okay. What does that mean?
Okay. Okay. So researchers came across this. What it means is that there are certain areas of the brain that are working in tandem together when a person is doing something. More precisely, there's something called the task activated network. And so that's when you are engaged in a particular kind of task, say solving a math problem. Your brain will light up in a particular kind of way. The default mode network is kind of the opposite of that. And so researchers came across this when they had people in brain scans, and in between asking the participants in these brain scan studies to engage in some task, they were just resting. And what the researchers noticed was when these people were at rest, there was a certain pattern of brain activity, the default mode network. And upon further investigation, they began to notice that when people are engaged in certain, because you're never not doing anything. To say that you're not engaged in any activity is not accurate, right? Because you're thinking, you're reflecting, you're maybe bringing up memories. And so this kind of introspective type of behavior is connected with the default mode network. Now, what psychedelics might be doing, there's the number of papers on this topic, particularly if anybody's out there interested in the work of Robin Carhart-Harris. He talks quite a bit about this. And the idea is that psychedelics they've observed to alter the default mode network. And so it changes and it kind of makes sense experientially. People are having a change in this interactivity of this default mode network, and they are kind of connecting. There's more maybe emotional salience to when they're reflecting on past memories. There's another idea which could be used psychotherapeutically. Another idea is around this concept of ego death. Sometimes in the kind of psychedelic community, people talk about this. This idea of where one's sense of self begins to actually diminish and potentially disappear almost entirely for some period of time. And this is sometimes equated or being connects to this idea of a mystical experience. So a lot of the research around this psilocybin in particular looks at this construct of the mystical experience, this idea of self-transcendence, and that may be connected to this idea of one's ego or sense of self kind of diminishing, and then having but there's still being awareness, so it's not like a person is blacked out. And with this kind of perspective, people relate to themselves, their problems, the world, society, whatever that they may be reflecting on in a different way, where they maybe they're not so confined by their previous ways of experiencing or seeing things.